Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is IJEOMA. So today I'll be taking you on how to make a maxi circle gown or a maxi flare gown. So up on the channel, I already have a video on how to make a maxi circle gown or a maxi flare gown. I'll be leaving it in the description box. So today I'll be showing you a different method on how to cut and sew a maxi flare gown or a maxi circle gown. Making this style, it's more like an off shoulder. So you will need the gown length and how off you want it to be, or the length of the strap you want to work with. Now when you determine the length of the gown and also the length of the strap, you're going to subtract the length of the strap from the gown. For instance, I'm working with 59.5 inches as the length of the gown, so this is the hemming allowance inclusive. Now I want to work with 5.5 inches for the length of the strap. I'm going to subtract 5.5 inches from 59 inches, so whatever I have is what I'm going to be working with as my gown length. So that means the length of the strap I'll be working with will be 5.5 inches and the length of the gown that I'll be working with will be 53.5 inches. So I'll be cutting the front and the back together, and the easiest way to cut this is to use the initial gown measurement. So the initial gown length is 59 inches. So I'm going to add 5 inches to the 59 inches. So that will place me at 63 inches. Now, because I want to cut the front and the back together, I'm going to cut out 63 inches in two places. So I have 63 inches here. So from this beginning here to where my hand stops is 63 inches. So this is for one side. So I'm going to fold it into two. That means I'm going to double it to get the front and back. So this is my 63 inches doubled, meaning that I'm going to use this for both the front and the back. Now before you cut out, it's best you put it on the floor or somewhere that is wide enough to accommodate this. Then you measure both sides or the fourth side. Just make sure that you have equal lengths. So the next thing I'm going to go ahead and do now is to cut this out. So after cutting it out, this is what I have. So I'm going to be demonstrating this on the floor because it will be more visible on the floor. So this is my front and the back. So here is the open end, which is here. I have the open end here. This is the open end also. This is the open end. And at that point there, that's the folded end. So the next thing I'm going to go ahead and do now is to fold this in a triangular form, or you can say folding on bias. So I'm going to pick this end here. I'm going to take it this way. I'm going to fold it to meet like this. So this is in a triangular form. So I just folded on bias. So when you're folding, make sure that everything is folded properly and the ones underneath are not squeezed. Now the next thing you have to also note is when you're cutting the front and the back together like this, make sure that the folded end laps on top of the open end, or the open end laps on top of the folded end. So guys, I lost the initial clip, so I'll be using this fabric to illustrate. Now the next thing you're going to go ahead and do now is to place your tape where you're going to get quarter of the bust circumference plus 1.5 inches or plus 2 inches. Now you're going to determine how free you want the garment to be. So you're going to add either ½ inch or you add 1 inch. So if you're adding ½ inch, you're going to add 1 inch for your sewing allowance. So if you're using 1 inch for your ease, you're going to also add 1 inch for your sewing allowance. So I'm going to be making use of 2 inches. So the quarter of the bust circumference I'm working with is 10.75 plus 2 inches. So that will place me at 12.75. So I'm going to place my tape where I'm going to get 12.75. So 12.75 places me here. So the next thing I'm going to do now is to go ahead and mark this. Then I'm going to square this out with a straight line. So this line will automatically be the chest line. Now from the shoulder to the chest line is 8 inches. I'm going to place my tape this way. I have 8 inches on the line. Now the next thing I'm going to go ahead and do now is to mark how off, or the new neckline. So remember I said I wanted to take 5.5 inches off. So instead of marking 5.5 inches now, I'm going to mark 5 inches. The ½ inch is going to serve as my sewing allowance. So I'm going to place this at 5 inches. So automatically when I'm done sewing, it will turn back to 5.5 inches. So the next thing I'm going to go ahead and do now is to square this out by drawing a straight line. So automatically this line becomes the neckline. So the next thing I'm going to go ahead and do now is to mark the length of the gown. So remember that I said the length of the gown is 59 inches. Now we're taking away 5.5 inches, which will serve as the strap measurement. So 59 inches minus 5.5 inches, I'll be left with 53.5 inches. Now I'm going to mark 53.5 inches. So I'm going to place my tape this way and I'll mark 53.5 inches, which is the length of the gown. So I'll be repeating the same process till I get to the end that way. So the next thing I'm going to go ahead and do now is to connect the markings. So after marking out, this is what I have. Okay, so the next thing you also notice is that this one, there's a shortage on this panel here. Okay, so what I'm going to do is, after cutting out, I'll be cutting another fabric to make up for the shortage. Now the next thing we're going to go ahead and also do is to work on the neckline. So to achieve the neckline, you're going to be making use of the strap to strap measurement. So now if you have the strap to strap measurement, you're going to divide it by 2. For instance, if you're making use of 10 inches, you're going to divide 10 inches by 2, which will place you at 5 inches. Now you're going to add ½ inch for sewing allowance to the 5 inches, which is 5.5 inches. Now you're going to place the 5.5 inches here. Now if you don't have the client's strap to strap measurement, you can make use of half of the shoulder measurement. Now once you have half of the shoulder measurement, you're going to subtract 2 inches or 1.5 inches from half of the shoulder measurement. So in this case, I'm making use of half of the shoulder measurement. Now I'm going to be subtracting 1.5 inches from half of the shoulder measurement. So half of the shoulder measurement I'm working with is 7.5 inches. So if I subtract 1.5 inches, I'll be left with 6 inches. Now I'm going to add ½ inch to the 6 inches, which will place me at 6.5 inches. So on this line, I'm going to place my tape like this and mark 6.5 inches. So this is where 6.5 inches places me. So I have 6.5 inches here. So the next thing I'm going to go ahead and do now is to connect from this 6.5 inches to this chest line. So you can go ahead and use your free hand, or if you have your French curve, you can go ahead and use your curve. So I'm going to place my curve this way. Now I'm going to connect from this 6.5 inches to the chest line. So this is what I have. So automatically this is our armhole. So we are practically done. But for the neckline, if you want to adjust the neckline, you can go ahead and do that, but I'll be leaving it straight this way. Now if you want to attach a pocket from the chest line, you're going to place your tape this way and mark 9 inches. So having 9 inches here, you're going to notch it when you're cutting. So you're going to notch this 9 inches so as to make you know where your pocket is going to start from. Now the next thing to go ahead and do now is to cut this out. So after cutting, the next thing I'm going to go ahead and do now is to separate the front from the back. Now to do that, I would need to cut this place open. I need to split it open and separate it into 2. So after splitting it up to separate the front from the back, this is how it looks like. So I have them separate now. Now the next thing to do now is to make up for this shortage here. So the best way to do that is to measure what you have. So I have about 15.5 inches here. Now the best thing to do is to add about 1 inch or 1.5 inches to what you're going to cut out, because we're going to be sewing the fabric piece you want to join here to this. So automatically you're going to be having a shortage on this, so the length will reduce. So I'm going to cut out 17 inches. Now the other thing to do is to measure what you have here this way. So I have 45 inches. So to also be on the safe side, I might cut 46 or 47 inches. So what I'm going to cut to make up for this shortage would be 17 inches by 47 inches. So once I'm done, I can cut out the excess. So I'm going to go ahead and cut that out. Then I'm going to cut them separate, one for the front and one for the back panel. So one thing you should look out for is to make sure that the design aligns together. So the one on the fabric piece which you want to use to make up for the shortage should rhyme with this, should rhyme with the one which you want to attach it on. So I've cut out the fabric piece for both the front and the back. So the next thing to do now is to open it up. So you're going to make sure, like I said before, that the pattern, if you have a fabric that has a pattern, the pattern should rhyme with this which you want to attach it on. So the next thing to do is to open this up. So I'm going to open this up, take it to the sewing machine. I'm going to separate the front from the back. Now I'm going to place it, making sure that I place it right sides facing each other. So it's going to be right sides facing each other, and I'm going to sew to that end. So I'll sew it to the end. I'll do the same thing to this other one. I'm going to take the fabric piece which I want to join. I'm going to sew it from here where there's a shortage to the end of this shortage. So after I'm done sewing it, I'll show you how it looks like. So after sewing, this is how it looks like. So when I open up, you see how it actually looks like. So this is the sewing inwards. So when you're done sewing, you go ahead and use your interlocking machine to finish up this part. So now the next thing I'm going to go ahead and do now is to place this properly. So make sure that you align yours properly. I'm going to go ahead now and cut out the excess. So I'm going to use this which I initially cut as a template. So I'll be using this to cut out the excess here to make sure that these two are the same thing. So I'm going to repeat the same process on the other panel. So to neatly finish up the neckline, there are two ways you can go about it. So you can decide to use a bias strip for the neckline, or you use a facing. Now I'll be using this fabric piece for the facing. I've gone ahead to fold the fabric piece on bias. So I prefer to fold on bias because the gown was already or initially folded on bias. So this will make it easier to cut out the facing. So the next thing I'm going to do now is to introduce the gown. I'm going to place it and align it properly on this piece. So I have my gown properly placed. So this is the gown and this is what I intend to use for the facing. So the next thing I'm going to go ahead and do now is to trace this out. So I'm tracing the neckline and also tracing the armhole. Now to determine the length of the facing, your facing should not be too long, neither should it be too short. Now you're going to come at the armhole here and mark at least 3 inches. So I'm going to remove our gown this way. Now from here, I'm going to place my tape like this and mark 3 inches. So from this 3 inches, I'm going to extend it this way. So this is going to be the length of my facing. So this is the length of my facing. So the next thing I'm going to go ahead and do now is to cut this out. So after cutting this out, I'm going to replicate it by cutting another one again. So one is going to set for the back and one is going to be for the front panel. Then I had to cut these fabric pieces for the strap. So the length of each strap is 12 inches and the width is 3 inches. Now the initial length of the strap, which we actually took off, is 5.5 inches. So because we need to cut the front and the back together, is going to be 11 inches. Now we'll need ½ inch for the sewing allowance to join the front strap to the front panel and also to join the back strap to the back panel. So that will give us a total of 1 inch, ½ inch for the front, ½ inch for the back. So I'll be adding the 1 inch to the 11 inches, which will place me at 12 inches. Now for the width, you can go ahead and use 2.5 or 2.5 inches, but I'm making use of 3 inches because this is for an elderly person. Now I'm going to be taking this to my iron. I'm going to fold this ½ inch inwards, and I'll also do the same thing to this side. I'll fold it ½ inch inwards on both sides. By the time I'm done, I'm going to fold it into 2 this way, and I'll make use of the pressing iron to smoothing it out. So for the pocket, I'm supposed to have 4 pieces, 2 for each side. Now I have my fabric here, which is 2 pieces. So by the time I'm done cutting this, I'll be using this to cut an extra 2. Now I'm going to place my hand this way, making sure that I have enough allowance for my hand. Now I'm going to trace like this. So when you're tracing, put into consideration that you also need your sewing allowance and also the parts which your palm or your hand is supposed to pass through. So you're going to make sure that you have about 8 inches as the pocket opening. So the distance should be about 8 inches, so that after sewing you'll be left with about 7 inches. Now I'm going to place my tape like this and mark 8 inches. So this 8 inches is going to serve as a guide. So my pocket opening is 8 inches. Now I'm going to place my hand this way. So you're going to determine how deep you want it to be. Now I'm going to trace. So after tracing out the pocket, this is how it looks like. I'm going to go ahead and cut this out. So to start sewing the gown, I'll be attaching the pocket first. I earlier said I'll be coming down from the chest line or the armhole depth by 9 inches. Now from the shoulder to the armhole depth or the chest line is 8 inches, and if I add the 9 inches inclusive, will place me at 17 inches. So meaning that the pocket is starting a little bit below or a little bit after the waistline. Now the 9 inches is not applicable to everyone. It depends on the height of the person. So if you're working with someone that is not so tall, it will be advisable to start the pocket from about 7 to 8 inches after the armhole depth. So I'll place my tape this way and I'll mark 9 inches. So this is where 9 inches places me. The next thing I'm going to go ahead and do now is to use my scissors to notch this part. So I'm notching for both the front and the back together. So I know that this is where the pocket is going to start from. So when attaching your pocket, you're going to place it the right side of your pocket, facing the right side of your gown. So just like this. So starting from this marking here. So the right side of my pocket now is facing the right side of my gown. So this is the wrong side of my pocket. Now the next thing to do now is to use your sewing allowance to sew it down. You're not going to use less than the sewing allowance, neither are you supposed to use more than the sewing allowance. So I've gone ahead to mark out the sewing allowance. So this is for ease. I have 1 inch width here, which is my sewing allowance. Now I'm going to demonstrate how it's going to look like. So the next thing I'm going to do now is to use my pin just to hold it in place. So it's going to be like this. So this is how it will look like after sewing, using my pin to illustrate. Now I'm going to open it this way. Okay, so after opening, you can see how it looks like. I'll go ahead and use my pressing iron to iron it to make it lay flat. So after ironing on this pocket, I'll be sewing very close to it. I'm going to top stitch on the pocket so that it lays well and it doesn't come out when the person is putting on the gown. Now I'll be repeating the same process on this other part too. So I'm going to place my pocket here and I will sew with my sewing allowance. After sewing, I'll go ahead and iron it out and I'll top stitch. I'll do the same thing to the other panel. So I'm done attaching the pocket and this is how it looks like on the inside. So when I open it up, this is how it looks like. So the next thing to go ahead and do now is to fix the strap on the shoulder. So after you attach the pockets, the next thing is to work on the straps. So for my strap, I said I want it at the end of the day to be 1 inch wide. So there are 2 ways I can achieve this. It's either I take it this way, fold it 1/2 inch inwards, and on this side I'll fold it 1/2 inch inwards. Then I'll further go ahead to fold it into 2 and I'll stitch on it and iron it. And the other way I can do this is by folding it like this, right sides facing each other, and I'll go ahead and sew it up with 1/2 inch seam allowance. So after sewing, I will turn it to the right side and use my pressing iron to lay it flat. So to attach the strap, I'm going to place it like this on the neckline this way. Then I'm going to use a pin to secure it. So this is how it is after attaching it. So on this side, I'll be doing the same thing. I'm going to place my strap this way, so secure it properly. Then I'm going to use my pin to pin it down. So this is what I have. So now I have both straps in place. The next thing to do now is to use my facing to turn both the neckline and the armhole. So I'm going to place the facing properly. The right side of the facing would face the right side of the gown. So after sewing, I'll show you how it looks like. So after attaching the facing, this is how it looks like. So the next thing you can go ahead and do now is to finish up the edges of the facing using your overlocking machine and also your hemming gum to put it in place. So the next thing I will do now is to attach this strap to the other panel. So I'll place the other panel like this. Now I'm going to introduce the panel which already has the strap, right sides facing each other. So the right side of this panel will face the right side of this panel. The next thing I will do now is to put the strap this way, and the other strap I'm going to place it this way like this. Then the facing, I'm going to place the facing on top. So the right side of the facing on top of the right side of the gown. So this is how it's going to be. So I'm going to go over it again. So I'm going to drop this strap like this, right sides facing each other. I'll place this strap here again, and I'm going to take the facing, the right side of the facing is going to face the right side of the gown, and I'll place it like this. So I'm going to go sew the armhole, sew the neckline and the armhole. So after fixing the straps, this is what I have here. So the next thing to go ahead and do now is to close up the sides, and to do that you'll be placing your fabric panels right sides facing each other. Now the next thing to go ahead and do now is to pin up the sides. So I've gone ahead to do that. I've used my pin to pin up the sides. And now when you're also pinning up the sides, you also need to pay attention to the pocket. So make sure that the pocket aligns properly and you don't have anyone poking inwards. So to close up the sides, I'll be making use of my seam allowance. So my seam allowance is 1 inch. So I'm going to mark 1 inch from the armhole this way, taking it down up until this stitch here, which is the pocket stitch. So I'm going to come down to the pocket stitch. So once I get to this pocket stitch, I'm going to climb or run or sew on top of this pocket stitch with about 1/2 inch. So I'm going to go inwards with 1/2 inch. Then after going inwards with 1/2 inch, I'm going to go this way. I'm going to face this way. So I'll start from the beginning like this and run on top of the pocket stitch with 1/2 inch inwards. Now I'm going to face this direction and I'm going to sew the pocket. So I'm going to use 1/2 inch round the pocket. So I'm going to sew 1/2 inch round the pocket. So while I'm coming out from the pocket with 1/2 inch, I'm going to still run on top of this pocket stitch. So the pocket stitch is here. So once I come out, I will still run on top of the pocket stitch. Following the pocket stitch, I'll continue with my 1 inch downwards. So now once I'm done with this part, I'm going to repeat the same process, the same exact thing I did here. I'll be repeating the same process on this part. Now I'm going to start with my 1 inch sewing allowance. So once I get to the pocket stitch, I'll come downwards by 1/2 inch. Then I'll go inwards round the pocket. I'm going to sew with 1/2 inch. Then I'll still come out here with 1/2 inch and continue sewing down with my 1 inch sewing allowance. So once I'm done doing that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to the right side and give it a press on both sides. So after sewing the sides and ironing, this is the final look. So for the bottom part of the gown, you can go ahead and fold it up, or you use your overlocking machine to finish it up. So we've come to the end of this tutorial. Thank you so much for watching. Please like, share and subscribe.